Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The two giants of planet Earth, China and India, 1 billion plus each, dominating Asia, sharing Asia. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com is with me. Gordon, you have taught me that China will get old before it gets rich, and India will be young forever. Is that correct?
Well, at least young for most of the 21st century, because you have a population which is young now, and at least through about 2050, it is going to be a very, very vibrant group.
We welcome Jayadev Ranade he's the president of the Center for China Analysis and Strategy. He is in New Delhi. Jayadev, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining. Most recently in the news, the Prime Minister of India, described as the quiet economist, Manmohan Singh, in conversation and a new treaty with the Chinese. Why is a treaty necessary at this point? What does it mean about the relationship of the two giants? Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, John. It's actually the Border Defense Cooperation Agreement which has been signed. And this is a confidence-building measure that has been signed between the two countries in order to prevent any mishaps or misadventure along the long, undemarcated border. The Border Defense Cooperation Agreement was considered necessary. In fact, it was initially proposed by the Chinese last year when their defense minister had come to India. And it provided essentially for two things. One was a demilitarized zone, to put it in loose terms, along the border. And the second was to freeze the border defense infrastructure construction by both sides, which would have been extremely disadvantageous to us. Anyway, after negotiations, what has been signed is one more confidence-building measure, which prevents, shall I put it as, seeks to prevent eyeball-to-eyeball or very close confrontations on the border.
Jayadev, there have been confidence-building measures before, but in middle of April of this year, we saw a platoon-sized force of Chinese soldiers camp out on the Indian side of the line of actual control for about 3 weeks. Is this going to be an agreement that will be forgotten in a year or so, or is this going to be something which is more permanent?
Well, the hope is that it is something that will be more permanent, but certainly what happened in the Depsang Plains in Ladakh, which is what you're talking about, was one of the factors responsible. The Border Defense Cooperation Agreement has been in the works for slightly longer than that, but it was what happened in Ladakh and later on what happened in Arunachal Pradesh that actually gave impetus to pushing for the confidence-building measure aspect of this cooperation agreement. And there was no agreement as regards construction of defense infrastructure by us.
Once upon a time, it was called the Great Game, Jayadev, and Manmohan Singh traveled on to Moscow, I think within these last days, visiting Vladimir Putin. Explain, please, the balance that he's seeking. Delhi, Moscow, Beijing. What is their relationship? How do they influence each other?
Well, we've had a very long-standing relationship with, the former Soviet Union, now Russia. And there is a collaboration going on the civil nuclear cooperation aspect. And that was one of the reasons why Manmohan Singh went to Moscow, apart from, the economic ties and the defense relationship that exists between the two countries. It was also to indicate that, it's not a standalone visit to Beijing, and to indicate that we do have a strong relationship with Russia. And it was after that he went to Beijing. The Beijing visit, the Chinese, I think, did try and introduce a lot of warmth into the relationship by hosting personal lunches and dinners. But the intrusions that happened earlier in the year in Ladakh and in Arunachal Pradesh did cast a long shadow over the visit.
Well, what I want to understand this sounds like three champions circling each other, looking for weaknesses or strengths, looking for alliances, two against one. Do I misread it?
I don't think it was a question of looking for an alliance. If we look at it from Beijing's point of view, they are quite concerned actually about the Indo-US relationship and how that is improving. And they're apprehensive. You know, they've got fairly negative views about what the US, they suspect, is planning. And they feel that the US is intent on containing China. So they're concerned about that. I don't think they have such concerns about the India-Russia relationship. As far as India is concerned, we're not looking for an alliance. But what we're looking for is a peaceful border so that we can focus on our economic development, much as the Chinese would like to. But that hasn't been happening. Chinese territorial claims have been expanding, and they've been getting more assertive, which is what explains India's desire to keep its options open and also build up better relations with the neighborhood.
Another thing that must be of concern to New Delhi is Beijing's closer relationships with Islamabad. You know, Pakistan is a very important part of what China seeks to do in that part of the world. And I'm sure that Prime Minister Singh must have had conversations about Beijing's continuing support, as a matter of fact, increasing support for the Pakistanis.
You're absolutely right, Gordon, that it is increasing support, and that was underlined when Li Keqiang, the Chinese premier, visited Pakistan earlier this year after coming to Delhi, and the number of agreements signed there. In tangible terms, we can see the burgeoning number of projects that the Chinese are taking up in northern Pakistan, in the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and along the Karakoram. There is also now the latest reports are about the new nuclear deal that has been signed between China and Pakistan. These are all very worrying factors, and they have been raised repeatedly with the Chinese, and I'm sure that they've been raised this time too, because I do notice in the joint statement references to discussions on the regional and international issues, and I'm sure this would be one of it, along with Afghanistan.
Jayadev, I mentioned the demography, young India, older, aging China. Is that a factor in the foreign policy of Delhi and Beijing?
It is a factor. It is a factor that will influence long-range projections of the economy and economic growth trajectory. Gordon is absolutely right when he says that China is aging. It's aging rapidly. It means, of course, that they will be emphasizing technology much more, which is what was unveiled in the last plan which they finalized under Hu Jintao and Wan Chapao. It also means that in India we will be pushed into creating more jobs, into promoting manufacturing industry, and making provisions for the larger number of youth. Plus, as a democracy, the internal dynamics have changed because the focus of the major political parties is now on wooing the younger voters, most of whom are between 25 and 30.
And John, you know, one thing's important, and that is some Chinese geopolitical strategists think that they must strike India now before India becomes too big and too strong.
Jayadev Ranade is president of the Center for China Analysis and Strategy. He's in New Delhi. We thank him very much. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com. Delhi, Moscow, and Beijing. No Washington necessary at this point. I'm John Batchelor.